So as is usually the case, there are a couple ways to approach this problem. Now for me, when I see that the initial value was 330,000 and it starts to depreciate, right away I'm looking for ones that have a y-intercept of 330,000. Better yet, I'm actually looking for ones that don't have that. So notice the only one that doesn't have a initial value of 330,000 for the y-intercept, in other words, the one that doesn't have the variable tied with it, is option A, so I could eliminate that right away. And since the machine depreciates, that means it decreases in value, versus appreciates means increases in value. So I know that the slope should be negative. So I could also eliminate option C because it has a positive slope. So now we're down to B and D, so we're pretty quickly able to get a 50-50 chance for ourselves. Now, at this point, I think the easier thing to do is just to plug in 10 to each of them to figure out which one will result in 80,000 after 10 years. So let's say, for example, I'll start with D here and plug in 330,000 minus 80,000 times 10, and I get a negative value. So that doesn't make sense. But in case you're curious, and just to be thorough, if we plug in 10 here in option B, we do get 80,000. So the correct answer is B. Now, if you're curious how we would have done this if it weren't multiple choice, well, if it starts out with a value of 330,000, the thing to note with time is always independent. So whenever you're graphing, you'll notice that time is always on the x-axis. That's called the independent axis because it doesn't matter how fast you run, how much it rains, how much you study. None of those things change time, right? So time is independent of all things. So the x-coordinate will always be the time coordinate. They obviously give us this range from 0 to 10, and that actually does end up being the x-coordinates, 0 and 10. But the reason is the initial value was 330,000 at year 0, we could say, when we started. 10 years later, it has a value of 80,000. And at this point, what we could do, and I would do, is just go to our program of slope int, which is program number 3. We'll type in these ordered pairs. And notice we get a slope of negative 25,000, just like B, and the y-intercept of 330,000.